Right. So I'll just intro Sam and myself again. So thank you all for coming to Sydney Modern Maps meetup. Today we're talking about using design techniques to help you make better decisions in delivery. But just as a bit of a wrap up for tech news for the week, the big one was that Adobe bought out Figma. If you're a designer or like Figma, everyone was a little bit sad, but I guess rest assured that this is the cycle of all major technologies. And I guess the one thing I'll say to that, Figma is still just a vector platform. So it's not actually getting us closer to crossing the divide between design and development. So as fun as it is, as funky as it is and popular, we're still ways away before that line is a bit more connected. So that's just one thing I think was fun to kind of share. So I'll just share my screen. I'm using this lapel mic and it's really weird to hold on to, so that's why I'm holding it. So as Sam said, my name's Mike. Michael, but everyone calls me Mike. The reason I'm called Mike is because there's already a Michael at ZAM. So I'm Mike, design director at ZAM. My job is to build the design capability and to help our customers really understand the problems they're trying to solve. After our design team to make they can be the best that they can be, ultimately deliver dev-ready designs that are useful, and can be delivered, which is the main thing, which is what we need to talk about today. So today's talk, what we're going to talk about, well, we're here for about an hour and a half. I think we'll be able to wrap this up in about an hour. So what did I want to talk about today was quite often design is thought of as pushing pixels or getting designs ready, but there's so much that happens behind the scenes that maybe people don't care about, or it isn't visible. But there is so much richness in how the source is getting made, right? It's the workshops, it's the back and forth, it's all of those little things that as designers we just do naturally. But what I find, and time and time again in delivering projects, I show dev teams different tools, different techniques, and they go, "Oh, that's awesome. How do I use that? What's that technique? What's that workshop tool or whatever it might be?" And I realized that there's so much substance in design tools. And design isn't necessarily art. It's, in my opinion, visualized decision making. It's all really design is. It's really all the different thoughts, opinions that have come together, something that's useful. I think that's, for me, definition that I can hold on to. It's also quite pragmatic. So to kick us off, Luke, you're up. And for those of you at home, what we're going to do is a little exercise, and it wouldn't be a design presentation. It wouldn't be a design session if there wasn't some sort of exercise. So, simple exercise. We're here talking about stopping talking and start drawing. For those of you at home, what I would like you to do is grab a pen and paper or use your iPad or whatever it might be. And I want you to show me how you make toast. Now for those of you that are here, grab some Post-its, you should have 5 or 10, grab a marker. And really what I want you to do is show me the process that you take to make toast. Sounds pretty simple. You've got some Post-its, got a marker, got a pen or something. Hopefully Luke's passed them out. That's it, really simple exercise. You've got 5 minutes. And because we're using Miro, I'm gonna put a timer on the clock and start it now. So for those of you at home, I want you to draw that, and then when you're finished, I want you to add it into the chat in this group chat in the Teams meeting. So just a couple minutes. This is really, really simple. Just show me how you make toast. So again, for those at home, just draw it on a piece of paper or whatever it might be, and just chuck a photo in the chat. So you can use as many or as few Post-its as you want.
Yeah. How you make toast? Draw it.
Just show us how you make toast.
Yes.
However is a meaningful way to communicate that visually. Show me how you make toast. So don't just write it out. I want you to draw it. You can as many steps or as few steps as you think is meaningful to visually communicate how you make toast. And then for those in the room, when you're finished, I want you just to come stick it up on one of these whiteboards. For those at home, just chuck it in the chat when you're done. Just a couple more minutes. Again, show us how you draw toast. Show us how you make toast. So can I get a thumbs up from anyone who's on the call that understands the instructions and is comfortable, or feel free to take yourself off mute. I invite you all on the call to take yourself off mute as well, and feel free to partake in the conversation. Thanks, Amir. So I said, when you're done, just come stick it up on the whiteboard. Map it out however you do it, and just, yeah, check on the whiteboards. Anyway, it doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be in any particular order. Just chuck it up. Say again.
The people on iPads, take a picture, if that's all right, and then I'll send it in the chat.
That's a you?
So then we're done with the huh? Making a mark. Oh yeah. Yeah, we'll go again to stick them up there.
All right, so just another 40 seconds. So if you've done it online, just to add a photo to the, take a photo of it and add it into the chat. All right, time's up. Awesome. Cool. Starting to add them into the chat. That's awesome. Cool. Cool. So I'm just adding some of the shots into the board. Is there a prize for the best drawings, Alex Tucker? Yours are quite impressive. I'm happy with that.
Yeah, I'm assuming I won't get it.
Great job, mate. Great job. All right. Okay. All right. So I'm just going to chuck this one up here and we can look at Alex. Sorry, because I think this is quite good. So that was a bit of a fun exercise. I'll add these up a little bit later, but when you actually come around and have a look at what people put up, you're talking about toast. So toast is one of those things that it's kind of ubiquitous in almost all cultures. However, it's different in many cultures as well. So if you live in a Western culture, you tend to use a toaster. Whereas if you're in Europe, you tend to use a frying pan. But if you're from sort of Southeast Asian cultures as well, the way that you make bread is very, very different. So the reason why this is a fun exercise to do is that you start to see the nuance between how people think about the same thing. So console.log, see, nice. I thought that was brilliant. But then you start to see, here's an interesting one here. So for those you can't at home might not be able to see it, but there's a focus on the artifacts of the toaster. So we're seeing the bread being cut. We're seeing an arrow with the bread going into the toaster, followed by, a dial saying select crispiness level. We're seeing like a lever being pushed down, and then sort of a weighting, and then a little picture of Vegemite. And then we look at other ones and we see bread goes into toaster, sharp and then done. So what you start to see is what people actually care about. People care about the process, people who care about the mechanics behind it, but also other people talk about the experience. So get bread, get 2 slices, put in toaster, activate, wait. So part of it in this particular drawing, they're talking about the process up until the point where they're actually eating it. Other people focus on the point of the experience of enjoying toast. And why does this matter? Why am I talking about it? Well, drawing is a real fun way to actually understand what people care about. And some people say, I can't draw. Drawing's hard. Well, actually, anyone can draw. I think the one up on the screen is brilliant. But it's a really fast way to communicate an idea. And the reason why it's great is because it leads to more questions. And that's actually the goal of it. It's not to make sure that we're all on agreement. It's actually to understand the nuances in how we talk. Now, this is a fun little exercise. Show me how you make toast. But generally speaking, when you do this in a big room of people, you start to see how people think about it completely differently. And that's where really interesting conversations happen. So why we're making toast? Because show me how you do a thing. This is toast. Yet 20 people did it differently. So the real takeaway from here is no matter how simple a task might sound, and you might have 5 people in the same room that agree of how that process should go, once you actually see it happen, that's when confusion happens. That's when ideas change. So I think, Sam, you're going around showing some post-its of how toast is being made. But this just shows us how different we are, even talking about something that we really understand. So whenever you're in a room full of people and you're working on a challenge, just see how they make toast, or see how they would see the solution to be delivered, right? If you're a developer and you're working with BAs, you're working with a client, sketch it out. Design doesn't have to be good, but it's amazing what happens when you start the conversation with a drawing. So also I'll go with a quote. So for those who don't know who Le Corbusier was, he was a famous architect. He also designed lots of furniture. But he always said that I prefer drawing to talking. It's faster and leaves less room for lies. And that's kind of what we're all about, is getting to solutions really fast. So let's get into what does this all mean? And why we're talking about this, why we're talking about drawing. At XAM, at Xan, when we kick off projects, we like to make sure that everyone's on the same page. We like to make sure that whenever we're talking about an idea or a concept or a solution, that everyone who's involved in the process is really clear on the outcome. So we use Miro on every project, whether it's a small gig or a large gig. We use Miro as a way to distill the essence of what it is that we're doing. Now, sometimes this might seem like overkill, but the devil's in the detail. And for the person who wasn't in the meeting, who wasn't involved in the pitch or whatever it might be, is missing out on those crucial bits of information on terms of how you actually deliver a solution. So what I want to take you through for the next little bit, for the next probably 40 minutes or so, is some of the tools, the techniques and the templates that we use, or design techniques that we use, that as, again, non-designers or as developers, BAs, product owners, product managers, you can kind of use in your everyday. That's really what we wanted to talk about today. So what we're going to talk about is our project kickoffs and how do we visualize vision, how do we visualize alignment. That's a really powerful tool, and also helps you when you're in meetings with clients who are disagreeing with something, or you're in a product team and you're not quite sure about where you should go. Coming back to a shared vision is a really great way to make good next steps. The second thing I want to talk about is defining opportunities or defining challenges, and really simple tools that you can use to get clear about the problem that you're solving or that you're building for. Because again, quite often there's features and their specification documents a mile long, and the first question always comes as like, where do you start? What's the MVP, or what's the first vertical slice that we need to start building? These are really helpful tools to make that decision pretty quickly. Like how often, and just as a question to everyone here in the room and for those online, how many times have you had countless meeting after meeting repeating yourself a million times and decisions not being made? Yeah, like every day. How often has a client come back and said, but that's not what we agreed to, right? Or how often have you said, there wasn't a spec, my favorite, or whatever it could be. Like it happens all the time. So communication is key, and designers are generally really good at communicating because we have to. We have to. We're not experts in a particular field. We're not bankers. We're not manufacturers. We're designers. So we've got a tough job sometimes of trying to distill complex concepts into a language that makes sense to anybody. Hence why we've got all these fun tools. So I really want this to be an opportunity for you to think about engaging in design exercises without thinking of it as a design exercise, but just thinking of it as a way to make really good decisions really fast. The next thing we're going to talk about is service maps. So service maps are a really powerful visual tool to get a sense of what is the customer experience or the user experience. What is the front of house or front stage experience? What happens on say if it's a web app or a mobile app or whatever it could be. Then talk about what happens behind the scenes. What doesn't a user see? What does the business see? And finally, what happens outside of the organization, third-party apps and all that sort of fun stuff. And we'll go through a bit of an example, but this tool is to give you a clear visual over what's actually happening with your product from start to finish. So this is actually a really great tool for building out user stories with ACs and even test cases, because you help to find the links between systems, not using traditional like networking like models, but using sort of swim lanes and sort of process maps. The next thing we're going to talk about is, again, just a really simple visual tool for capturing a concept. So again, this isn't rocket science, but they're just really cool templates. So for example, let's say you've got a client or you've got a product owner who's trying to communicate an idea to you, and maybe you don't have a designer on the team, or maybe you don't have time for detailed design, or you just need to capture back-end functionality. There's really clear ways where you can capture the background, the issues you're solving, and get alignment. So this is all about making good decisions and also having it documented in a single place that anyone can access. And then, scrolling. Sorry. And then finally, what we're going to talk about is a model for doing sprint reviews. So something that all devs do, showcases, whatever it might be, but how do you get feedback? So we're going to talk about simple design tools for getting feedback. We're going to talk about other things for just capturing risk, decision-making, and all that sort of thing. So again, I've done all this in Miro because Miro itself is just a digital whiteboard. Many of you have used it, I would say. But the best part about all of this is that we run entire projects out of Miro. And 80% of the design happens in here before we even get to Figma. So quite often when you get finalized designs and you're in DevOps or you're in Jira and you see a link to Figma and you can see the design, and you're like, oh, why is that the case? There should always be a link to Miro, to this, because this is where the decision was made. As I said earlier, design is really just visualized decision making. So again, these are just very simple tools or techniques that designers have been using forever, and you don't have to be a designer to use this. But it's amazing what happens when you just use simple tools to make sure everyone's on the same page. So let's start with a kickoff. So what's a kickoff? We've all done it before. We've all started a project. How many of you have been in a really bad project kickoff where it just went south right from the start? Show of hands. Yes, yes. A couple people. Yes. How many of you have got halfway through a project and there was half the requirements were missing? Yeah, there you go. A few more hands. Okay. All right. How many of you have gotten to a project and the CEO walks in 6 weeks in and flips a table and says, this is not what we're doing? Just me. Yeah, we've been there. Okay. So how many times have we introduced new functionality? You know, yeah, all the time. Great. This is a weapon that we use to stop that from happening. And it seems like a bunch of words, but this is the most powerful design tool in my kit. I love this thing. It's my pride and joy because it's your project one pager. Many of you have seen this all, and Miro makes it really big, but this used to live in a 30-page PowerPoint or slide deck. And here's a great one. How many of you deal with specification documents that are 30 pages long that sit in some repository? Or, yeah, we go, a few hands up. All the time, long-winded documents. We have the technology to put it on a page. It's a big page and it's small print, but it's on a page. And we refer to this in every single sprint review. Let's go back to the goals. So I'm going to take you through this model. And what it does is it makes sure that from the very first meeting, everyone who is involved in delivering or signing off on delivery, all on the same page. And quick tip, this entire canvas takes about 2 hours to complete, and you need everyone in the room. So that's the hard part with facilitation, is getting the right people in the room. And if you ever have a client who says, oh, the CEO will come in next week, you say, we'll delay it a week. Oh, but well, we need to get started. No, you don't. We need that person in the room. Having that confidence can be hard, but trust me, it'll help you in the end. So let's just go through it. So why do we need a kickoff? Because most projects fail before they even get started. We didn't have the right voices in the room. And talking about voices of any project, we kind of talk about them in 4. So you have a voice of the business. All right, the voice of the business is the CEO, the decision maker, the person who pays the bills. The second voice we need is the voice of technology. Right, the voice of the person who's actually got to build the thing. Need that person in the room. Then we need the voice of the customer, voice of the user, the voice of desirability. We need to know if what we're building is actually going to work. And finally, we need the voice of design. And the voice of design brokers the conversation, right? It's to say, well, I'm going to see how the developers make toast. I'm going to see how the CEO makes toast and how customers make toast. And I'm going to triangulate the solution based on the consensus of all 3. That's all design is. It brokers those conversations. So we need those 4 voices in the room. So again, as I said before, this kickoff gets us on the same page. So in this particular template, and you might chop and change this, you might see some things in here that are interesting, some things that aren't, but the goal here is just to give you a sense of how we do it. So
You said 4 voices. Customer, developers, and design.
Design, and so you have technology, the business, customers, and design. The 4 voices. So when we get into it, we want to really understand what kind of project this is. So is it discovery? Is it a POC, an MVP, a next milestone, or the entire project? Get really clear about that definition Again, how many times have we been on a project where it's supposed to be a POC and you're going, we're going to scrap the code. That doesn't happen. We just keep going. Whoops. No, that's not what a POC is. Define what this means to you and your business and your project teams. This is a POC. Be prepared to throw it out. Well, this is an MVP, so this is leading to something bigger. Okay. But get clear about what kind of project it is. Then we talk about the time frame. How long is a project going to go for? And then project goals. What are we here to achieve at a high level? Want to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But the most important thing about this perspective is you want to know what happens if we don't do this project. One of the things I always love to ask is that what's the impact to the industry? Like, why do we exist as a business? So what is the impact to our business or the industry that we operate in if we don't do this project? The impact to the business, impact to customers, impact to our people. What happens if we don't do it? And if the answer is, oh, nothing really, then why are you doing it? It's keeping people busy? Maybe. That's an impact to our business. We need revenue. Okay, that maybe is a fair reason. But what would happen if we didn't do the project? And finally, some high-level outcomes. So that's kind of the start of it. Then we come up to the visioning bit. So in the project vision, it's all about getting some clear statements. So in this thing, you go around the room and say, what's your vision for success? What's your vision for success? What's your vision for success? And you put in an each line statement. Again, that is we're asking people how they make toast. What does success look like? What does success look like for you and for you and for you and for you? It's all on one page. And then what we do is we vote on the one that we like the best, or we combine the two, do a bit of wordsmithing, and we have a single statement that captures a higher order goal. And then it's all on the canvas, right? It's there. Then we tend to write an elevator pitch. So elevator pitches on every project are a great way to get excited about what you're doing. And this might seem like a whole lot of work for maybe even a sprint. But I tell you what, starting a project off like this, when people walk out of the room, they're buzzing. They're ready to go because they actually agreed on something. So writing an elevator pitch is a great little tool to be able to communicate what your project is. How many times have you been on a project and you said, oh, what's the project about? And everyone sort of explains it differently. There's slight little variations. Oh, it's just an upgrade to this, or oh, we're enhancing this. You don't have common language. Common language leads to common purpose. Common purpose leads to great, amazing outcomes. This is all showing how we make toast. We're all getting on the same page. I know I'm saying it a lot, but it bloody works. So do your elevator pitch. And this is a really great framework. I encourage everyone to do it. You just basically say that, well, for a customer who has a particular problem, the product name is a type of product that has a certain use case or does something that unlike the current state or the status quo or the competitor, our product delivers us a value proposition in a very particular way. So this elevator pitch is a really clear way to get a consensus visually about what it is. And yes, it's in writing. But the cool thing about using Miro, chuck a post-it note on it, put a big icon, put an emoji, whatever you want, draw all over it. Be like the toddler on the wall, because it creates a level of like intrigue to it. So try that. Then we get into sort of the fine print. So we talk about objectives, we talk about goals, we talk about maybe an SOW if you're in consulting. We also talk about priorities. Now, this is the most powerful thing you can do to help you make decisions, is the iron triangle. I don't know if many of you may have come across it before, but the iron triangle is a very powerful visual indicator about what's important to the business. So with the iron triangle, you've got scope, budget, time, and quality, and none of them can be of equal importance. So when you have to make a decision, you ask yourself, what is most important to you in this project? Is it getting all the scope delivered? Is it keeping to the budget? Is it the time frame? Or is it the quality? You can't have all four at one level. That's just not life. If you've got a client that doesn't accept that, don't work with that client. But generally speaking, you kind of want to get them to think about pull on the levers, because what this does is this gives you a toolkit in difficult conversations and agree to it. What levers can we pull on? So as an example, you might say scope is least important, which never happens. Let's say we'll start with what is the most fixed? Budget tends to be the thing that clients don't want to budge on, or your company can't budge on. We can't move on the money. We're fixed to $1 million, half, 100,000, whatever. Then they say, well, quality is the second most important. high quality, fixed budget, but high quality. Then you might say, well, time is the next one and maybe scope. So what happens there? You've got a very clear visual tool that tells you what your priorities are. Now, this isn't a contract, but what it does is it lets you know that if you're up against it, let's say your velocity is not great, or let's say you've had to change out your dev team, or let's say new requirements were added, and you say, well, we've got variable scope, so we need to trim out the scope to cater for this. So again, a really clear visual, simple tool to visualize what's most important, because from this particular model, we don't have any more money. That's it. So the only next thing you can move on is a scope, perhaps time, or even quality. So again, iron triangle, really powerful tool for making good decisions. Next thing we like to do in the kickoffs is talk about the actual timeline. So you might have sprints, weeks, whatever is important to you. You just map out what the ceremonies, when are they all going to work, and then talk about it. These are our sprint reviews. These are our stand-ups. Okay, cool. Then we talk about outcomes, and the powerful thing about Miro is that you can put your deliverables or a high-level backlog with your features or high-level things you want to deliver. And the cool thing is that when you're done, you can just sort of move it down. What a simple way in a sprint review. We've done the thing. People get excited moving. People love checking a box. How many people love checking a box on their list? How many people write a thing on their list and then instantly cross it out and feel great? Yes, we all love it. This is what this is. It's a checkbox. It's like, yes, we did it, team. Put it on the board. Visualize it. Play with it. The interactive level nature of a product tool like this creates a buzz you just can't replicate. So when I say stop talking, stop sitting on meetings for 2 hours without actually delivering something. So even if you're moving items on a backlog, share screen and use a tool like this. Don't just have conversations where you're just talking heads, because chances are you forget things. Things don't get recorded. Decisions don't get made. Using visual tools makes decisions actually get made in meetings. Because isn't it the worst thing when you have a 2-hour meeting and the decision happens a week later behind closed doors and everything changed? This stops that. Well, it reduces it. It's not a silver bullet, but it helps. The next thing, this is more something that I add in because, we're consultants, so we often deal with clients who have their own product owners, and we're coming in as a product team. So we have designers, BAs, devs, QAs. So we need to help businesses, especially who maybe don't know software development. We need to let them know what a PO does. What does a PO, what does a product owner actually do? So in our experience, an engaged and empowered product owner is probably one of the number one indicators of a successful project, because that person is removing blockers. That person is getting the right people in the room and they're making decisions. So we get the project sponsor, because what happens is the project sponsor says, oh, they're the PO. Okay, really? Yeah, they're the PO. Like, okay. So then we go through this. So we ask the PO, are you empowered to make decisions that are responsible for maximizing the value of the work that the team will do? Yes. Okay, great. CEO agreed to it. He's got decision-making authority. Delegated, but he's got decision-making authority. Or, oh, I don't think I have that. Okay. So what do you need support with? I don't know how to use DevOps. Okay, shocker. I don't know how to use Jira properly. Okay, that's fine. We can help there. So we ask things about, can you work with the team to define definitions of done, all these things. So this acts like a bit of a visual contract. And when you get what I do and what I encourage you all to do, if you're virtually facilitating and using tools like this, get them to put the slider themselves. Get them to move it themselves. Another really handy tip, whenever you've got a list of tasks, I want you to take a screenshot of everyone's avatar or face, go on Teams and take screenshots and drag their face. Get them to drag their face onto a task. Don't just assign it to somebody with an email. There's your avatar, drag it onto that objective. Because putting your face on something, you can't hide that. It's like your face is on it. You're going to do it. So I love to do, so when I do this exercise normally, I'll get them to get a screenshot. I'm like, cool, I'm going to put your face right there. And when they see and it's a behavioral thing. When you see your face attached to something, it's like, oh shit, this is real. So this is why visual thinking and visual communicating helps make good decisions, because here can be a powerful term for, okay, maybe I need help. Great. So this is a time to talk about it. The other thing too, can you make stand-ups? Can you come to workshops? Can you partake in all of these exercises? They go for 2 hours. We've already looked at the plan. Can you be there? Yep, good. Put your face against it. Really powerful stuff. Then we talk about the core team. So again, mobile phone numbers, emails, everyone's there. And then we talk about who supports the core team. So that's project sponsors, account managers, delivery managers, executive leadership. They're all on here. So full accountability, transparency, ownership, clear definitions, timelines, it's all on a board. You can't dispute it. You're in the room. You put your face on it. People don't like to back away from that shit. So just get them to do it. One other thing I really love doing in kickoffs is who surrounds a team. Again, this is where requirements tend to come in at the last minute. We ask who else in the business needs to be involved. Do we need marketing? Do we need IT, data, support, the executive? Who else? Voice of the customer. I don't know. Who else needs to be around the core team that are going to deliver it? Because this is where the gotchas come in. This is where the late requirements come in, because we need to go, well, we need to engage with this person early and get them in the room. So don't wait for someone to surprise you. Ask the question. Who else surrounds this? Get them in the room. Then we talk about finally around like collaboration, so meetings and when that all happens, what channels, so Slack, Teams, whatever. Capture leave and holidays. It's nothing worse when the designer goes away for 2 weeks and you're like, oh shit, so put it on paper. Also, what keeps us up at night? What things that we're scared about, that we're worried about, that we don't want to talk about, get that written down and put your mitigations in. And finally, next steps, let's do this. So that was a kickoff. It goes for 2 hours. It's how we run it. And what you have at the end of this, it's covered in Post-it notes and people's faces, and there's decisions on a board. And then what you do, this is the best part about Miro, is that you export as an image or a PDF and you send it to everyone along with the link so they can access it. And then you lock it down so no one can touch it. Yes, got a question. So the question for those on the line, the question was, is this a template or did I make it myself? We made it ourselves at ZAM. So this is part of how we do kickoffs, and something we built for our projects. And this is very much tailored to how we like to deliver in agile projects. So this is how we sort of do kickoffs. But yeah, good question. But no, it's not on Miro. So before I go on to some of the other templates and other tools, I thought I'd just take a couple of questions about the kickoff and how using sort of visual tools can help you make better decisions. Any questions? Yes.
One sec.
Yes, yeah, thank you. Amazing tool. So what about for clients who keep changing the requirements, because we cannot control them, you know, like when they come over and ask for new features or new functionalities of the app.
The speaker kept cutting out. What was the question?
So yes, what about clients who keep changing the requirements? Because this is actually the real world, you know. They come over and just say like, we need to change the screen, or we need to change the functionality or add new features, you know, like how do we deal with this, with this one pager? Like, can it be changed like after like a couple of weeks?
Great question.
Yeah.
So just to summarize that for those who may not have heard it, and I'll just clarify, summarize, which is how do you deal with new feature requests, or how do you use this tool to help have that conversation, right? Great question. This tool can help you manage project goals, project vision, and high-level scope. When it comes down to new features, that's probably a separate conversation, but that's where I use the backlog. And generally speaking, you say there's only so many people, there's only so many hours in a day, and here's our velocity, and here's our backlog of features. What I do, I open up DevOps, and then what I add is a story with 6 dashes and write cut line, another 6 dashes, and I say, cool, here's your list of features. Right now, based on our current velocity and what we've estimated, we've got 100 points on our backlog. We're doing 10 points a sprint, so we've got 10 sprints. This is estimated out at 2 sprints. It falls below the cut line. What goes below? Oh. And you get them to make the decision. You just literally stand away. Here's the backlog. What do you want? So that's how I have that conversation. So Burn up, that's a different conversation, but really good burn ups, effective estimations, and a really well-managed groomed backlog is your best defense to manage new feature requests. But that's a different conversation. Conscious of time. Any other sort of comments or questions about kickoffs? Yes, one at the back.
Just wondering how you navigate some of the kind of the experience end to end when you've got, I guess, a wide variety of backgrounds and experiences. I'm thinking more about the traditionalists who steer away from the Miros or the murals of the world. Something that's very visual, it's very collaborative, but it's not in a PowerPoint or it's not in a Word doc. So how do you kind of navigate and get their buy-in, especially when they're decision makers, I guess?
Great question. So the question was, how do you get buy-in from, say, traditionalists that haven't yet been, introduced to these sorts of collaborative tools like Miro? Was that a good summary?
Yeah.
Great. I don't give them a choice. Normally, I just run the session and give them the password, and I wait until they sign in. And listen, I think it's an interesting question because quite often we assume people's willingness to participate based on their demeanor. But it's amazing what happens when you smile and say, "This is great, come on the journey." They're like, "Oh, okay." So you've got to invite people in. It's not, so there's a difference between inviting and telling. So when I facilitate workshops with clients, I say, "We have this tool that we would like to use, and we'd love your input because this is going to determine the future of your product. Would you like to use it?" Well, okay. Versus, "Oh, we're going to use Miro, do it." It's just more of an invitation. So sometimes you're not going to have that, where they're not going to have that buy-in. And what that takes is good facilitation, where you just need to be like taking notes or have someone in your team that's sort of scribing on their behalf. That's also a really useful technique. If you don't get people who are actually going to add to the board, cater for that and have people that are scribing. So if you go to the olden days funnily enough, when I was trying to find Post-it notes, I looked in my bag that I haven't cleaned out since pre-COVID and found like half a kilo of Post-it notes because I spent most of my career flying around the country facilitating workshops. So quite often it's about just giving people a license to participate. And that's really what design does. It's just an invitation, like, "Hey, here's a pen." I put a pen in your hand before with a Post-it note and said, "Show me how you make toast," and you put it up on a board. So sometimes it's just an invitation. So, rightio. Any other questions on kickoffs? Cool. All right. So the next one we're going to talk about is defining opportunities. So defining opportunities, I used to call this like defining our challenge, because I like the term challenge, because a challenge is a problem worth solving. That's what challenge is. If you say, "What problem are we solving?" it's negative. It's like, "Oh, I don't want to solve problems. I want to win." So a challenge is kind of like an invitation to win. Like, would you like to address this challenge? So what I like to say is, what is our unique challenge that we're up against? What is a problem worth solving? So there's a lot of different models or different techniques for defining problems and opportunities. But I like this one. The sailboat is a colleague of mine actually used to, he was a great illustrator, and he had this wonderful sketch of a sailboat. And I used to use it, and he said, "Will you not use that? Because it's kind of my thing." I'm like, "All right, so I won't use it." But so that's an icon. Thanks, Miro. I'm not an illustrator, by the way. So what are we looking at here? Let me zoom in for those that are online. So this is a really simple canvas for getting clear about the challenge that we're up against. And there's 4 kind of key questions that sometimes, depending on the level of buy-in, people kind of answer in the same way, but you might get nuances. So for example, we ask, what's blowing wind in our sails? So what's working well? Because with every challenge, you can't just kind of shit on the current state completely. There's some things that work well. There's some things we want to keep. There's some things that help us win. So what's blowing wind in our sails? And the next technique is a time box. The time box is your friend. especially in Miro, put 5 minutes. So we're going to do this in 5 minutes. I had 10 people in a workshop create an entire concept map in 15 minutes with a specification list of about 100 features just from clustering. Said, put all these in categories, put a circle around it, give it a title. There's your epic. 15 minutes because you give it a time box. So this exercises and these sorts of design techniques can really help you as devs or as product owners just get clear about what problems we're trying to solve. So we ask the question, what's working well? We ask a question about what guides us. So the guides us is about vision, values. It's about what's the end state. So it could be something as simple as we've got great technology. What guides us is we've got a clear vision for our business to be the best of whatever and to help people in this way, right? Then we can talk about the negatives, but always start with the positives, right? It's kind of like just a good technique. Start with the good, help people feel good about it. It's like, yeah, okay, it's not all bad because it never is. And quite often when you do these sort of exercises, people, it's like pulling teeth. What's good? What's good about our business? What's good about our product? Let's celebrate that because there are people that have come before us that have tried really hard and we should honor that. So always start with the good. Then we get to the bad. What's holding us back? So what's not working so well, right? So it's a slight nuance, but what's not working so well? So what are the problems? What are the pain points? And then finally, what could stop us from succeeding? So these are threats. So this is kind of like a modern SWOT analysis. It's kind of like a way to kind of visualize the challenge in these 4 different quadrants. Because there are things that are pushing us along, there are things that are pulling us along, there are things that are holding us back, and there are rocks in the water, there are things that we might trip up. So this is a really clear way to define those 4 different areas of a problem. Then what you do, and this is the best design technique I think ever, is voting. Now Miro does voting, but I don't like it, so I do my own. So I put a person's name against it. Again, one fun little thing you can do is you use people's avatar as a voting favicon. It's kind of fun because then you can see what people voted on. But red dots also help, and I kind of like them because it's a bit more democratic. But the idea behind the red dot is you get 5 votes, you get 1 minute, vote on what the biggest problems are. So below here, you'll just get people to put red dots. And then what happens? You do that in 5 minutes. And then you get to a board that looks a little bit like this. You get this scattering of post-it notes with problems. This technology is slow, or users don't like it. We've got a poor conversion rate, or whatever it might be. But you take the 3 or 5, no more than 5, because then it's too big. 3 to 5 biggest problems, biggest challenges, and you put at the top. Cool. You've just made a decision about what's important in 5 minutes. Not a 2-hour conversation, not 3 hours of workshops, not weeks and weeks of back and forth. You've made a decision about what's important in the most democratic way in 5 minutes. Now, people might say, oh, but that's not all the problems. It doesn't matter. But that's not everything, Michael. We have all this research and data. I'm like, it probably doesn't matter. But it does matter. It probably does matter. Why doesn't it probably matter? Well, in my experience, the first 10 people in a room tell you 80% of the problems. And good design, and I'm not trying to take a stab at good research. My background is in ethnography and human-centered design and rigorous research. But what I found is that you can spend 3 months in research or a 1-hour workshop and deliver a prototype, and you'll get further along in the first 3 hours than you will in 3 months. Because design is iterative, and so should research. Research should also be iterative. So this process of what are the big problems, vote on them. You're all halfway through your backlog prioritization. Good, we're going to solve this problem. Because if we're talking about agile delivery, what do? We have a backlog. We start at the top, we work our way down, and we readjust accordingly. Problems are no different. Treat problems and opportunities like you do features on a backlog. Put them in a list, groom it often, prioritize it regularly. Start with the top, work your way down. It's no different. So this is really simple. Again, it seems simple. There's art in facilitation, but voting, time boxing are your biggest friends in making good decisions. And then finally, what we do, well, not finally, the next step is design questions. So I could talk for about an hour on design questions, but I'm not going to. I'll speak about it for 2 minutes. So a good design question is something that is feature agnostic, and it is the question to the problem. So the problem might be we have I don't know, sales are slow. There you go. Low conversion might be the problem. Okay, what's the design challenge? It's not how do we increase conversion. Well, if we ask the question, what's the problem with conversion? We might dig into it and dig a bit deeper, and we might find that actually what's happening is that, you know, when people get to the cart or whatever it might be, we don't have enough payment options. Okay, that's actually the problem. So then the how might we might be more about, well, how do we make, you know, better ways for people to easier for people to purchase with us.
There's a question that came in the chat. Is involved in voting?
Azug, thank you for keeping on that, Luke. So just back to the voting bit. Everyone who's in the workshop, everyone who's in this session, everyone gets a voice. And I go back to the original comment about the 4 voices in design and in especially in any project. You need the voice of the customer, you need the voice of technology, the voice of business, and the voice of design. Everyone is of equal importance in that conversation. Ultimately, the guy who's the person, I should say, sorry, who is paying the bills will probably have a bit more sway. That's just life. However, in these sorts of, we try to keep it democratic because what we want to do as facilitators or even in project teams is to understand the general consensus about what's important. So when we talk about who is involved in voting, everybody. Everyone who is on the call votes. That's why it's important. So you map out what works well, what does success look like, what are the problems, what are the risks. Everyone gets 5 votes, give them 5 minutes, done. You've just got your list of priorities. And it's not 100%, but we iterate towards maturity. So yeah, when you get your 3 priorities, we start with design questions. So a design question is about a goal with a person in mind that has context and there's a problem to solve. So the way we kind of tend to frame it is, you know, how might we? It's an opportunity to solve a problem, but we frame that as how might we deliver a measurable outcome that helps a customer in a particular scenario solve a specific problem. So that's kind of a template for creating a how might we. There are many different ways to do it, but the reason why how might we's are great is because they're solution agnostic. So if you write a how might we as, oh, how might we, what's something with a feature in it? How might we make nicer buttons or something? It's like, okay, that's not the problem. The problem might be, well, actually, we've got a problem with accessibility. How might we make using our product more accessible? Okay, cool. That's something that we could think about. So a design question is something that if you can scratch at it, if you can scratch at a solution in a design question, it's pretty terrible. It should allow for a lot of different ideas. So you create how might we's and you map the challenge to the how might we. Then, ooh, what happened there? Sorry, team. So once you've mapped that how might we out, you just explore ideas. Okay, so the how might we could be, how might we create a better purchasing experience in our platform? Okay, 100 ideas. Same thing, we vote on the ideas. Okay, this, we like this. Okay, cool, we vote them. And then what do? Then we prioritize them. Okay, take the highest priority voted ones, leave out the stuff that no one voted on. Quick wins, game changers, fillers, and time wasters. Simple matrix. Everyone loves a matrix. High impact, high effort, low impact, low effort. It's a temperature test. It's not scientific. It's the team's feeling of what's important. Again, visualized on a board for everyone to see. The next thing I want to talk about in facilitation, especially in these sort of design exercises, have a parking lot. Have a visual parking lot. How often do you have someone say, listen, I know this has got nothing to do with what we're talking about, but I just want to spend the next 30 minutes talking about next year. Great, just going to stop you for a second. Just going to put this on the parking lot. Come back to it if there's time. Okay. Have a parking lot. Man of rabbit hole conversations you can avoid. And it's visual. They can see their thing that's really important to them on a page. You haven't forgotten about it because it's on the board. So always say, that's great. I love your enthusiasm. I think it's a brilliant idea and it's really important to the business. We should absolutely consider that. However, the focus of this workshop is this. So I'm just going to chuck it here. Is that cool? You comfortable with that? No, I really need to talk about it. You sure? No, I can wait. Okay, great. Or no, it's really important. Well, you tried. Have a parking lot. It saves time. So, quick summary of this particular design technique. We define the opportunity, we prioritize the problems, we create design questions, we explore ideas, we prioritize the ideas. There's sprint one, or actually entire year's worth of development. But when you take what you're doing is you're distilling and you're reframing the problem with the opportunity, with the ideas, and you might come to something that they've already talked about. But the reason why this is great for decision making is that when you see the process that they went through to get there, they feel more ownership of the outcome. They're less likely to come and throw other stuff at you because they've been involved in the process. And the biggest takeaway that to think from this is it engage these people in these conversations, because they're less likely to interrupt you in mid-sprint saying it all doesn't matter anymore because they've been on the journey. And that's really what these design tools are all about. It's inviting people to collaborate and be part of the process. Rightio. So any questions about these particular tools and defining opportunities? Yes. I was just waiting for the microphone so people on the phone can hear me.
Thanks. Yeah, as we know, we have already need 4 different voice from the kickoff station, kickoff section, and we also need 4 different voice in the defined opportunity section. I mean, the 4 different voice we need in the kickoff section, and do we also need that 4 voice in the defined opportunity this section?
I think the way I like to frame it, whenever you're having a conversation where decisions need to be made, the people who are affected by those decisions or are accountable to those decisions should be in the room. In saying that, I tend to believe that the people who are in the room at the time were the right people to make the decision. But in saying that, it's always, you need to have that balance. So like if you're talking about technology, that's fine. But always ask yourself, actually, should I bring someone else into this conversation so it makes sense? Sometimes if you're talking about, I don't know, back-end integrations and I don't know, whatever, maybe that's, you don't need to have them in the room. But when you're talking about problems and define this, and why this is great for devs is, in my opinion, is that the devs on our teams, when they're brought on this journey, they're more engaged in solving it. They're more likely to think of new solutions or think a little bit differently, and also own the outcome, which for our business is super critical, to take ownership of what's actually going to be delivered, being a part of the process. And there's no, well, you're not a designer, so you're not involved in this. No. Everyone does this, everyone. Because it's like, I'm not a designer, I design. I'm a consultant, but I just do design. It doesn't make me a designer. So everyone always as much as possible. And the fun thing is, when I've run these projects and I've done similar things for small companies, startups, government, whatever, I had about 30 group captains from the Royal Australian, about 15 group captains from the Royal Australian Air Force do this sort of stuff, and they loved it. Just more technical jargon, but it's fine. But it's really transferable. It's not limited to industry or context or even background, because it's just talking about problems, and you're providing a fairly consistent framework to allow those conversations to happen. So the other thing to take away is, don't start with an empty canvas unless you know how to make the template work and you know how to use it. Start with a template and guide them through the process. People feel comfortable about that. And one thing I heard today, we had a guest speaker at our company do a talk on speaking with impact, and one of the things that she said, which has really resonated with me today, was whenever you're dealing with complexity, it's not about making the complex issue accessible or simple. Just focus on the next step. And it's kind of just keeps rushing around my brain that the best way to make complexity accessible is just, what do we do next? Back end, crazy technology, fun stuff, language, jargon, this is what you need to do next. Okay. And this is what this is. This is the next step. So, yeah. All right, conscious of time, we're just going to move into the next tool, which is, yes, sorry, question.
How many people maximum involved?
Okay,
Yeah.
so when you're running workshops, right, it all depends on your level of comfort in managing lots of people. So the biggest workshop that I ran was with 200 government personnel. 200. Yeah, that was intense. We had 12 facilitators plus an MC and a few runners, and that was a monster exercise. But for something like this, I like to works, especially in video conferences. Eight people is kind of the sweet spot for making decisions. I don't know. There's no science to it. It's just a number that feels good to me. So I'm going to go with it. 8 feels good because generally speaking, you're going to have your core team. So you might have front end, back end, BA, designer. There's 4. Then you're going to have customer, PO, sponsor, something like that. So you kind of get to about 8 pretty comfortably. Any more than 8, you're going to get people who just sit and listen and just watch and go, this is all shit. I don't really care about this. You're going to have people that are rhinos and they just dominate the conversation, or you get the hippos, or the highest paid person in the room. There's all these other funny animals of acronyms of people that come into workshops and meetings that dominate. But generally speaking, if you've got 8 people, you can pause and say, and this is another technique for when you're ever facilitating conversations and trying to make decisions. Say, okay, so we've gotten to this. What do you think? 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 Do we all agree? Yes. Okay, cool. So sometimes you force people to make a decision. They might come back, you go, I didn't feel comfortable with that. That's okay. The next time they will be, and the next time they will be, because you start setting a precedent that their voice is going to be heard. So yeah, back to your question. If you're running workshops with more than 8 people, you need to have a fairly rigid, not rigid, but a good structure for how you're going to roll with it. But also be flexible enough to pivot if it all goes ass up, which it can happen, especially when you're running these sorts of exercises.
And it has to be like on every sprint, you have to do this exercise, or just once?
Say again?
You have to do it on every sprint?
Oh, no. So again, there's no formula for this. There's no silver bullet formula. These are tools and techniques that you apply when you have particular problems to solve, or you need a particular type of collaboration. So if I think about this particular map, if you're in a sprint 0 and you've got a backlog of requirements, but you don't know where to start, this is great. This is great. When you've got a laundry list of features, do this. Because what helps people realize, no, we've already done the discovery. That's fine. We're just here just to clarify. Okay, this studio design agency came in, did this great 3-month discovery piece, and it's groundbreaking research of all these personas. We have all this stuff. Cool. Just gonna get some clarity. Takes 10 minutes. Okay, so what are the, okay, cool. And even though, and more often than not, the client goes, well, we know this. And you might go, okay, now we understand. But the value of this is also helping you have sort of an agreement with the customer or the client that you understand their problem. This builds a lot of confidence with a client because you're asking questions that maybe no one else asked them yet, or no one had the confidence to ask, or maybe skipped over. But at the very least, the client's going to be comfortable that you understand their problem. Okay, they've spent 2 hours mapping this out and prioritizing the features. So this is a really useful way to just help you, with features. So you may not do this all the time. Sprint 0s or discovery sprints, design sprints, perfect. But also when you've got new information coming through, and I'll go to another template in the middle, which will help you with your new feature request. But yeah, so there's no particular formula. These are just different tools you can use when you think they're appropriate. Anything else from anyone on the call? Anyone here talking about these tools? No? Okay. So we're just going to talk through this one, and then at a high level, I'll talk about the next one, and we'll wrap up in the next probably 15 minutes. So cool. So the service map. Any service designers, BAs in the room? Bit of project managers that do a bit of service mapping? In a former life, he says, with confidence. Yes. So what is a service map? A service map is an amazing tool to visualize all the intricate elements of a system. Yes.
How do you define how do you differentiate? Sorry.
How do you differentiate between a service map versus like a service blueprint?
Good point. So a service blueprint is a blueprint that gives you a list of instructions and goals and objectives to deliver a service. A service map is more about current state. It's not pointing to solutions necessarily, but they do get used interchangeably. I do find the terms, but in my mind, the way I differentiate a map to a blueprint is a set of instructions. A map is just to align on understanding. So, and also a blueprint feels kind of finalized, right? Whereas a map feels a bit more sketchy. Like I can play with a map around and stuff, but a blueprint, it's like, ugh. You know, maybe they're these huge design files with all these nice icons and they've got these pretty colorful swim lanes and that's got a typo, but I don't want to tell the designer. It's happened. I know because I've designed massive blueprints that go like right across the wall. Damn. These are better because this is all about getting understanding. So what is a service? So there's a few elements of a service map and why are these important. Whenever you have a customer experience, you have a front of house experience or front end. So let's take an application. You have a customer that's using a product. You have an application that they're using. Then that talks to some back end system. And that talks to people and staff that have to execute in particular steps in the way. So in the example I've got here on screen, we've kind of got a customer who's buying shoes. So let's use this as an example. So as a customer, they have a user experience. So we always start with the actors. So the actors are all the people that are involved in the service. So a service is all the layers that make up an experience that make it happen. So in this case, we've got the customer, right? And they have a line of interaction. And let's say they call, maybe it's an old school product. They have to call up to buy shoes because the internet wasn't invented, who knows? They call up a support center. I want to buy shoes, there's a problem with my shoes. Okay, thanks, Mr. Customer. Let me direct you through to our sales team, which will help you buy a new pair of shoes. Great. So that's maybe some of the actors. And so that's that front of house experience. So they're the touch points that a customer or a user has with your product or service. And then what we have is this line of visibility. This is the veil that the customer doesn't see past. They don't see everything below this line because what's below this line? The warehouse, back of house, your admin team, your finance team, your marketing team, your IT department. The customer doesn't see any of this, but it's the supporting infrastructure that makes that experience happen. And finally, there's a behind the scenes. So the warehouse, maybe they'll deal with freight and logistics, hand stuff over, but they're not the ones that are driving the trucks. In software, the way I like to think about it is you have an application, you have a sort of a customer that's using a sort of an application. There might be staff in the back end that have to manually process certain steps along the way. Then you have the back end, APIs, third-party applications, all those sorts of things. So what we do in a service map is map out how all this stuff connects together, right? So we start with the customer experience. So once upon a time, a thing happened. Because of that, another thing happened. Then one day, because of that, a thing happened. So there's just a story. And it follows a particular model of they discover that there's something to use your product. They learn how to use it. They use the product. And then finally, it ends in a goal. What's the customers wanting to achieve? What's the goal? And then what's a follow-up? What happens after they succeed? So that is a really simple tool. So AJ and Smart do in their design sprint, they use this simple mapping technique. I encourage you to look it up. But what you do is just quickly map out the high-level customer experience. And then you go, okay, well, what's the application doing? What's the next layer? What's the back end doing? And what are any third-party integrations or databases or all sorts of other weird stuff that we need to talk to? You put it on a page. And this is a great tool for having conversations about how things talk to each other. So for example, there might be an application where maybe you're talking to Azure B2C. Maybe you've got Okta or you've got some other sort of authentication application that's doing that. The customer only sees email and password. That's all they see on the application. The customer experience is I log in. The front end, the front of house experience is enter email and password. But what happens behind the scenes? Well, we've got to call out to Okta, and they've got to do some checks and balances, and then they've got to return a result, and all that shit's happening behind the scenes. But what does the customer see? Tick. The other reason why this is great, too often we see customers not understand the inherent complexity of what it is that you're building. This can really help them see that and understand the importance of it. So service maps laid out like this can help you get clarity. They help you find where there's dead ends. Oh, we want this experience where they get this. Hang on. How many of customers have ever talked about personalization and just get really excited? Have you ever heard about? No? Okay. Yeah, big smile. So you get customers say, oh, we want these personalized dashboards. And we want them to predictive analytics and just to know. It's like, we want to be Google, but we don't want to be Google. It's like, okay, strap in everybody, because you don't have the data for that. Oh, shame. Well, this can help you let them know that that doesn't exist. And so, because that often happens too, like devs or marketing teams, they get all excited, but they don't understand that has to come from somewhere. So service maps help you build clarity with multidisciplinary teams that are responsible for delivering a service, and you put it on a page, you make it really, really visual. And the other cool thing is, because you've got post-it notes and it's a big canvas, everyone can see it. And this can take a long time to build. You might spend weeks building this out, or you might do it in a day. I run this exercise in 2 hours, and you have everyone in the room, and you start from top to bottom. You go, what's the customer experience that we want to deliver? What's the goal? Customer A wants to achieve success. That's your first question. Who's the customer? We've got this great persona that our marketing agency did. Cool. What's their goal? They want lifelong happiness. Okay, what's that goal in relation to our product? They want to buy a pair of shoes. Great. What's the follow-up? Give us a review on Facebook. Cool. Done. How do they discover? Instagram, Facebook, they Google it. Okay, great. How do they learn? They hit a landing page. They see a price. How do they use it? Add to cart, buy, payment portal, tick. Great. There's your customer experience. And then you go, okay, what happens in the warehouse? What happens? So that's just a really simple buying shoes process. But putting it on a page helps people go, we don't talk to this system over here. So, okay, we need an API that'll do this. We need to build out this. So we need to do that. So service maps, super, super powerful as devs to get clarity. All right, so we're at 7:48. 2 more to go. Quick one. Concept template. You can take a photo of this, screenshot it, do what you want. It's pretty easy. Customer comes to you. We want a new feature. Okay. What's the context? What's the background? New customer acquisition wants to do da-da-da-da-da. Okay, we can add the background. What problems are we solving? What are the business goals? What are the customer needs? What are the questions we're trying to answer? That is 12 hours of emails and meetings and back and forth on a one page. It's all about decision making. It's on a page. You can see it. It's there. We had the conversation. Current state, future state. So you might do a simple process map. Customer A goes to websites, buys shoes, gets blocked because payment doesn't work with Google Pay. Bad news. Okay, what's the future state? Buy with Google Pay. Done. So current state, future state. What this is a very, very shared understanding about what is the feature that you're trying to build. So as devs, you can use this, especially if you don't have a BA, if you don't have an empowered product owner who's making good decisions and you've got to try and help them get there. These tools and templates can really help you do that. So what's the context? What are the problems? What are the goals? What are the needs? What are the questions? Current state, future state. You do that in half an hour. Great, we've made a good decision. Again, parking lot. Always have a parking lot. The last thing I want to talk about just quickly is about getting feedback. And here's a really simple technique that we use in sprint reviews. So when we do a demo, whether that's the dev team showcasing what's been built or designers going through Figma, this is a really simple testing summary or a feedback summary. It's the easiest template to use. There's 4 questions: positive, negative, questions, ideas. What do we like? What don't we like? What questions does this idea or solution have? And then finally, What are some ideas for improvement? It's really simple. But having this in your back pocket when you're in a meeting and you're presenting a solution is a really easy way to keep track of it all. Because again, what happens when that's not what we spoke about last week? Well, let's go to the sprint review. This is what you said. Well, maybe you missed it, and that's okay. But use these templates in sprint review. So what, at a high level, what does it look like? You've got your demo. You present your demo. You get all your feedback. Then we talk about a weekly status report. So are we green? Are we on track? Are we trending up or down? Let's remind everyone of the vision that we did in the kickoff. We talk about the scope. What did we do this week? What are we doing next week? And because we all love a checklist, we just add some stuff to the list. And it grows every week. And the best thing is you copy this and you duplicate it down. You've got all your sprint reviews in one Miro board. You can do your sprint planning. You can, maybe not planning because you need DevOps or Jira for that, but also do your retros. And it's all there on the one board. So whenever you need to go, well, what happened on that project we did with that client that one time? Here's the Miro board. Here's everything that ever happened. Cool. It's great. So that's how we do that. And we like to summarize this in a weekly email. So on a Friday, we'll go this week, next week, wins. So we talk about wins, risks. So again, simple stuff. Any risks for the projects, any decisions that were made, any other comments, and the good old parking lot. So I guess we went through quite a lot. There might have been too much information. That's my fault because I get excited. But what I really wanted to impart or to share with you is that, you know, this doesn't feel like design. It just feels like project management stuff. But there's these design's quite subtle when it's used well. So the best design is when you don't even know you're using it. And so the aim of this is just to provide these sort of techniques and tools that anyone can use to get clarity on purpose, to get clear on what problem it is you're solving, to really understand all the elements that are in the product, in the service, in the experience, you know, to get clear about what it is you're building in terms of any features that you've got spec'd into a backlog. And finally, how do you keep track of progress? Do it all in Miro. It saves so much time. I don't use PowerPoint. Sorry, Microsoft, but I don't use PowerPoint anymore. I do it all in this. And then when I have to go to Figma, I just put a link to Figma. That's it. So you're creating less time making documents, less time on meetings where you're having to repeat yourself all the time, and you've got a complete decision-making log. Every single thing that happened on a project. It's hard to dispute. And it builds a lot of confidence in the team and in the business that you're on it. And all that you're doing is just providing really simple tools for keeping track of the conversation. So we're at time. Well, not really, but close to it. Happy to take any questions too about some of that stuff as well.
Thank you. Is there like integration tools with Jira?
Say again?
Is there integration tool with Jira? Because a lot of teams use Jira. So
I don't know. We use DevOps probably.
okay.
So I haven't used Jira in a long time, but I know that I don't think there's any particular integrations. The best thing is just to, oh yes, we got to.
But there is.
There is? Sweet.
So there are some templates. So you can draft your product roadmap in Miro, and then there's an integration if you want to convert that to templates.
Yeah, cool. So just to capture that conversation for those on the online, the question was, are there integrations with Jira? The answer was yes, there are. In some capacity, I'm not too sure because I don't use it, but there are, which is great. I learned something tonight, so thank you. Yeah. So yeah, happy to take any other questions from anyone online or anyone here about what we've talked about tonight.
A question from a project management perspective, I guess. I find one of the challenges in tracking risks and all that sort of stuff in Miro is around traceability and having an audit history that you would get in, say, a Confluence or in a Jira. At the same time, those tools can be a really big pain in the bum. back to that buy-in question. How do you kind of get the buy-in from some of the more traditional kind of probably project managers on the client side that are?
Yeah, so I guess the question is again, how do you get buy-in from traditionalists when you've got existing tools? And Confluence isn't cheap, right? So businesses spend a lot of money for these tools. So this doesn't replace Confluence, right? It doesn't replace any other sort of integrations. But I'm not here trying to sell Miro. I mean, you could use any other tool for this. This is more about the tool rather than the application or platform. I just wanted to make that point. But how do you get buy-in? Well, I think I'm a big fan of like just showing. So if I just run a workshop or a session, I use it quite often, almost exclusively. I'll run a workshop using Miro, and I'll get someone say, that's awesome. How do we do that? Like, let's do more of it. So quite often it ends up happening that way. I've not ever really received pushback. So I don't really know how to answer that question properly because I've just used it and people kind of go, okay, cool. But that's my experience being a consultant. So it's probably maybe less client side where you might have existing infrastructure where, you may not be able to use a tool like this. But, I've not particularly had that issue. I think that when you structure a good session and you've got the template there, they're already using it. So kind of just helps if you just facilitate that way, I guess. Probably a bad response, but I've just not particularly had that exact question, that concern before, sorry. So I guess the answer is just use it. Just do it. Ask for forgiveness later, I'd say. Any other sort of comments? Yeah, Ricky.
So great framework, but do you find sometimes through the years that you've done this and then people start to go through the motions of, now we're doing kickoff and now have to have like a clever little flippant, like meaningful thing to add? Like, how do you stop the rhythm of people going, now it's time to do like?
I'm not too sure I understand the question, Ricky. So
like going through the motions of, like,
here we go again.
Yeah, the here we go again motions. Oh.
I think if you've got a client or a team that are approaching a project with a here we go again, it's not being done properly. It's probably the easiest solution because I don't know, you spend a third of your life at work, you might as well have fun, right? So if you're not really enjoying it, then sort of why are you doing it? But in terms of is the question about how do you create novelty or how do you?
How have you like overcome or like changed tack where you've seen?
Right.
Yeah.
So okay, cool. So that's a good question because depending on the audience, some are quite rigid and quite structured in how they like to approach things. There's always has to be a realm of flexibility whenever you're using these tools, because the worst thing that you could ever do with these is go, right, this is the formula, 1 + 2 + 3. No, it doesn't work that way. You have to think of all of this like ingredients, and you're making a delicious meal, but you're the chef. So you kind of have to know a little balance of this, a little bit more of that. It's not about following the pattern and following the bouncing ball. It's about playing with them enough to know when to dial things up and dial things down. So, for example, I could have spent another half an hour, but I know that everyone's like, I'm so tired, dude. Enough, cool. Start to wind things down a bit. That's okay. So it's kind of more like a trade craft, I would say, Ruki, which is to say you get a feel for the client or the environment that you're in. Sorry, the context of the client, if they're comfortable with it or not. You just got to play with it, I think. Cool. Thanks, Andreas. Hope you got something out of it. Anything else? Any other comments, questions, concerns, ideas? No? Well, thank you all for coming along. I really, really appreciate it. We'll send out some sort of screenshots of some of these tools. Some of them we'll send out some links and stuff to a few bits and pieces as well. We might be able to use in future stuff. Thanks.
Thank you, Mike.